Report once, everywhere with Reportify. Next slide, please. So before I share a secret sauce, let's meet the faces behind Reportify. My name is Danielle Sopkin. I'm a recent UC Berkeley graduate and co-founder of Reportify. I graduated Berkeley in 3 years and at the age of 20. I now work at JPMorgan Chase as a global finance and business management analyst. But during my time on campus, which wasn't also pleasant, I was a leader at the forefront of innovation and advocacy. I appeared frequently on national news, wrote extensively about campus Jewish social life, and became a trusted voice as a columnist at the Times of Israel. I gained global audiences speaking directly with the President of Israel, President Herzog, and President Pavel of the Czech Republic. But I didn't build Reportify alone, so let me introduce my wonderful co-founder, Hannah.
My name is Hannah Levin. I'm a senior studying at Stanford University, computer science, pursuing my master's degree with a specialty in AI. As president of the Stanford Israel Association, I'm at the forefront for fighting anti-Semitism at Stanford. For the last few months, I've been working on getting over 80 non-Jewish students to the NOVA exhibition in LA. And we've raised $60,000 for these trips and hoping to do more. And so for us, for the last 4 years, we keep on seeing people come onto campus and saying, we know what we're doing this time. And it's always people, with all due respect, that have not been in college for decades.
Next slide, please. So the problem we found is twofold. The first is that there's overwhelming procedural complexity in reporting. And the second is that repetitive tasks lead to student burnout. Next slide. So imagine you experience an incident on campus and you're bounced around from portal to portal to portal just to end up exactly where you started with no follow-up and no resolution. There's overwhelming complexity in all of this with scattered resources and no clear guidance, with most students simply not reporting at all. Next slide. Now, during my time on campus as the president of Bears for Israel, I've had the pleasure or displeasure of becoming far too familiar with our reporting portal. In fact, I once submitted over 350 student incidents for students on campus that experienced the rise of anti-Semitism post-October 7th. 350 incidents. Now think about that. You'd imagine that number would trigger at least some sort of response. And you know what we got? Not a single email, not a single follow-up, not a single shred of accountability. Nothing. And that's not a new story. That's not specific to UC Berkeley. The system is broken, and let's go to the next slide, please. Let's read this last part all together. And it reads, the submission of this form on its own does not constitute a formal complaint. So imagine students coming to me on campus, pouring their time, energy, and trust into a system that leaves them completely isolated and vulnerable. Next slide, please.
And so the system is, by design, meant to fail students from the start. But Danielle, why is it that way? Why aren't there other Jewish organizations doing this?
Now imagine, you just submitted one report to your university, and it took, what, 45 minutes? And now you have to report somewhere else. And from the student perspective, I have 2 problem sets due tomorrow, a midterm, everything I have to do for my student organizations and clubs, and you're telling me that on top of that, I have to report to 5, 6 other portals? For students, it just doesn't make sense. The problem of reporting is that it fails to make sense to students. Next slide, please.
So what we've seen is that schools have a monopoly over reporting. They go with power unchecked, and there's no oversight. And so only 20% of reports go to the ADL and solutions like the ADL. And so if the ADL, our greatest ally in fighting anti-Semitism while universities are putting cases under the rug, isn't aware of what's happening, how can they be keeping universities accountable? Next slide, please. And so what we're seeing is the last 4 years is that the current reporting solutions fail the cost-benefit analysis for students. There's so much work, and they don't get anything out of it. Next slide, please. And so what we're seeing is that nearly 80% of students know how to report but choose not to. Next slide, please.
And this is the underreporting cycle. It starts with students navigating complex levels of bureaucracy, with most students giving up before they even start. Now, for those who persist, they're met with no tangible outcomes, No actions, no results. So obviously they lose trust in the system, turning to peers rather than authority, and that ultimately ensues burnout. Students don't want to report, and every time they think of reporting, they decide not to. And because of this, we're seeing the disgusting normalization of anti-Semitism with the mindset that this is just how things are. And ultimately, there's no institutional accountability. Because rules are rules, it seems, except when applied to Jewish students. Next slide, please. Now, cue Reportify.
Reportify is a streamlined process of reporting incidents on campus, tracking the responses, and keeping institutions accountable. Next slide, please. So how does it work?
Our solution is the perfect triangulation of automation, accountability, and everything that students are missing on campus. It provides easy incident capture, multi-portal compatibility, and dashboard connectivity. But let's dive into it more. Next slide.
So whether the student wants to write up what happened or dictate the incident, the platform will use generative AI to generate a summarized report. And so then that is now evaluated automatically by the system, looking at local policies, state laws, and seeing what laws were potentially broken, and potentially flagging a lawyer if need be. And then based on that, all the student has to do is click, and it's all of a sudden, it's auto-populated in the portal. And reporting doesn't stop there. You know, the solution is accountability. And so for that, our future versions of our platform will have accountability, tracking the tickets, making sure we know when to follow up. Next slide, please. So here's a really quick overview of the demo. As you can see, you can just quickly fill in the basic details of what happened. Next slide, please. And it will automatically auto-populate the portal. Next slide, please. And so what we're seeing is that all of our competitors, they are addressing individual problems within the cycle of underreporting that we mentioned. Versus Reportify, we address cross-platform reporting, legal support, track the progress of the tickets, and we use AI scaling together. Next slide, please.
And obviously, none of this would have been possible without Adir's support, uniting us with mentorship, guidance, and expertise. And a big shout out to our mentor, Tal, who flew in from Israel to be here today. But it doesn't stop here, and we need your support too. Next slide, please.
So after launching at 10 universities, we're hoping to expand, iterate, and go to 25 additional universities, but it doesn't stop there. Reportify is going to expand to other hate crime reporting spaces, as well as integrating within HR systems. Reportify embeds itself within bureaucratic systems and keeps it accountable. Next slide, please.
But our ultimate goal is to keep Reportify's key features free for students. And in order to do so, we'll have a sustained and scaled model and ultimately moving into new spaces and environments over time. Next slide, please.
And to do that, to scale Reportify, we need to hire software engineers, cloud computing, cloud storage, as well as LLM API calls. And additionally, the information collected is quite sensitive, so we want the best of privacy and legal experts on the team. Perfect. Thank you so much.
We'll now open up to the judges for questions. If you guys could stay on stage for a sec. Yeah, no worries.
Can your solution identify and highlight potentially dangerous areas similar to platforms like crimemapping.com to help Jewish individuals stay informed and avoid locations with higher risks of anti-Semitic activity?
So during my time on campus, I also worked as a data scientist for an organization called Jewish on Campus, and we tried to do a very similar model. So basically identify days that are more prone to, let's just say, dangerous activities on campus specifically for Jewish students. And this was drawing from social media, from platforms like Twitter/X, and also just what was going on geospatially in the world, per se. So within our solution, we're also integrating with a similar model of actually understanding day-to-day what's going on. And since we're using Gen AI, we're also scaling our model with each iterative submission. So it's learning on its own, and that's something that we're hoping to expand over time.
Can you clarify how your solution is superior to what ADL are using today as a reporting system?
Yeah, as you saw, the ADL, it's still a lot of work, and it's not just that. You submit it, and oftentimes you don't know what happened to it. There's so many times I've submitted something, never heard anything back. There's no one united platform that, as I mentioned, addresses all of those problems within that cycle of underreporting. There's the burnout, there's making sure what actually happened. We're using AI to actually scale this to make it possible that every single incident can be addressed and we know where it went. Not just, oh, I sent it and maybe something might happen. There needs to be accountability. You know, reporting is the first step, but for true accountability, we need to track the ticket, as I mentioned.
And also just to add on very quickly, the key feature of Reportify is that it stores your incident. And through data and surveys that we've done, we've seen that with every incremental incident or with every report that you submit, you're actually losing data over time, because who has the memory to retain something that happened to you that's traumatic? You don't want to keep going through those memories. So Reportify, you initially submit your incident and it stores it. So you can cross-populate through many platforms. So although ADL is a great way to submit, it doesn't actually tackle the burnout, the exhaustion, the over-reporting.
Actually have a few more minutes for questions for you guys, so I'm going to be asking you some questions that the community submitted. How does your system know if the incident is real or not?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
If the incident is real or not.
So because we're using a lot of security features, whenever you're setting up your account, you're going through dual authorization, you're setting up credentials, student emails. It's a very thorough process. So not just anyone can get onto the platform. You need to have a .edu email, which is certified through basically any university.
And what are the ways that you'll be able to get this message to the students and disseminate your product?
Yeah, so Danny and I are actually part of many group chats of the top leaders testifying in Congress, and we have an army full of students ready to use the tool. I mean, I think it's a very common trend in all our group chats is like people send it on the WhatsApp. It goes somewhere, but there's no tracking part of it. So we have many students who are looking for a tool to make sure there's accountability, and so we have 100 students ready for that.
We've also had the pleasure to be a part of many different fellowships and programs throughout our 4 years or 3 years on college. So we have a very thorough and robust network of students on campus, and they're leaders that they left on campus now to follow in their footsteps and help us with getting this across different campuses.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.